Hello everyone, and welcome to a most exciting game that was played in a Blitz banter session between Magnus, Carlsen and Laurent Fressinet. As you can see, those are their handles, Maxi Bogues and Zlatan56. It was played, I already mentioned, on Chess24 platform, and it's a really exciting game, and it really brings back memories. If you remember, if you are new to the chess world or new to chess in general, maybe you don't remember, but in 2014 they played a famous match called Too Weak Too Slow. I also did a video on that game, so feel free to check that out. I will put a link to it in the description below. It will be the first thing you see. And also, if you want to see the original footage of this game, I will also put a second link in the description below. Olympia Urkan recorded it for Twitter, so you can check that out as well. But it's a really exciting game. Carlsen has the white pieces, and we have a really crazy King's Indian game. So without further ado, let's check it out. It's 5 years. It's time for a rematch. Let's see how it went. Carlsen has the white pieces, and for some reason my board is flipped. I don't do videos with a flipped board. Sorry about that. Carlsen has the white pieces, and he opens with d4. Like we mentioned, we have the King's Indian, so knight to f6. We have c4, g6, knight to c3, and bishop to g7. The King's Indian is on the board. Carlsen goes for e4. We have d6. This is the standard line of the King's Indian. Bishop to e2. The queen and bishop now guard the g4 square. So if black castles already, Carlsen is ready to start the attack with the g4. Fressinet indeed castles, and we do have g4 by Carlsen, so already starting the attack. And it's interesting, I looked it up, this exact same position has been played many times. And black actually has a better winning percentage than white in this position. Black won some 46% of games, and white won 40% of games, so I thought it was interesting, but that's just the King's Indian, a very, very mysterious opening. But okay, c5 with d5, grabbing more space in the center, and now there have been plenty of moves played in this position. e6 has been played here, e5 has been played here, rook e8 has been played, a6 has been played, but the move Fressinet plays has not been played, especially not in classical, but this is a Blitz game, so why not? b5, and it's not like a Benko b5 or something where you want to break up white center, double the b-pawns, or anything like that. Here, Magnus can just grab a clean pawn, not yet with knight captures, because the knight for the moment guards the e4 pawn, but Carlsen just pushes g5, he dislodges the black knight, we have knight back to d7, and now comes knight captures on b5, so Carlsen grabs a clean pawn. And okay, bishop to a6, just now threatening to capture and now mess up white's pawn structure, which would be okay for black. But Carlsen just retreats with the knight. We have knight to c3, and now we have knight to e5. And already you can see that black is getting some play for his sacrificed pawn. The knight and bishop are eyeing that c4 pawn. Already black is threatening to win back the pawn. And here Carlsen has to decide how to go about it. Best idea is queen b3. Just bringing another defender, activating the queen. But if you go something like b3, then it's terrible for white. Then Fressinet had in mind knight captures on c4, opening up the attack here. You win back the pawn, and the white is not able to recapture because of bishop captures on c3 with check. You win the rook, and it will just be very good for black. So after knight e5, Carlsen goes knight back to b5, and now Fressinet captures it with bishop captures on b5, although there was another interesting line, just knight captures on c4. It's just grabbing material, and after bishop captures, you get bishop captures here. Bishop captures and queen to a5 check, now winning the bishop. And after queen blocks, queen captures here, and the material would be equal, but it's just a very nice line for black, really controlling all of the dark squares here. The knight can be developed, the rook can be brought into the game, you can push a5, a4, a very nice game plan for black. But it's a Blitz game, not to be overanalyzed. So, after knight b5, bishop captures, we have pawn captures, and now c4. Just playing very exciting chess, as it is a Blitz game, and he faces the world champion, so why not? We have f4 by Carlsen, and now just giving up yet another pawn, knight to d3 check. Fressinet seems to be like the honey badger. He simply doesn't care. Bishop captures on d3, c captures on d3, queen captures on d3, and now knight to d7. Again, black wants to go to c5. This will come with an attack on the queen, so he wants to save more time while developing his pieces. We have knight to f3. Carlsen, of course, also wants to develop pieces, and now knight to c5 with an attack on the queen, also pressuring the e4 pawn. Queen to e2, keeping an eye on the e4 pawn, and now comes queen to a5 with check. Black blocks, and now comes queen to a4, with ideas of infiltrating with queen to c2, but also there is the immediate threat of just queen captures on e4, as both the knight and queen are attacking the pawn. So Carlsen advances it. We have e5, and now you can choose between some lines. You can go pawn captures, or you can go knight to b3. Also an interesting line. After knight to d1, still you would have knight captures, queen captures, and now d captures on e5. F captures on e5, and queen captures on a2. And with the white king still being in the center and not really have a lot of cover, you don't really gain anything by castling. It would be even with white's massive pawns in the center, would be a pretty equalish game, but much easier to play for black. So after e5, we have d captures on e5. Fressinet again goes for the more interesting line. Knight captures on e5, and now comes bishop captures on e5. Here you cannot capture with the queen, otherwise you get knight d3 check, winning the queen. So you have to capture with the pawn. We have pawn captures on e5, and now comes rook 8 to d8, just pressuring the d5 pawn. And here, again, it's very dangerous to keep the king in the center. For example, if you go something like b4, attack the knight, then black can even go for this rook captures on d5. Pawn captures, and now queen here, attacking the a2 pawn. Sorry, the a1 rook, and also will clean up the center here. After rook to d1, you can just capture here, and even though white is up a piece, it will be very hard for white to play this with the king still being in the center. You know, a very dangerous position, especially in Blitz, where you don't have a lot of time to figure out all the squares your king can go to. So here Carlsen just castles, and now comes rook captures on d5. We have b3 by Carlsen, attacking the queen, queen to d4 check. Now, if you don't want to lose the bishop, you have to block with bishop to e3, but then you lose the e5 pawn. Bishop to e3, and now queen captures on e5. So Carlsen loses both the d and the e pawn, and now black equalizes in material. It's 5 pawns each, but black's king is much safer, so black is to be preferred here. We have rook 8 to d1 by Carlsen, rook captures on d1, rook captures on d1, and now just knight to e6, going after the g5 pawn. And there's no good way of really defending it. If you go something like this, then you give up the control of the g3 square, just queen g3 check. Now you lose the h4 end. Sorry, well, not with the queen, but obviously the knight will be able to capture. So not something Carlsen wants to do. After knight e6, we have a4. Now Carlsen is hoping that everything just stays as it is. He wants to push a5, b6, create a pass pawn on the queen side, and try and push it all the way. Knight captures on g5 by Fressinet, and now comes queen to d3. And here Fressinet starts the attack against the white king. Knight f3 check. And here Carlsen goes king to f2. King to g2 was better because, as you'll see, it doesn't allow the knight to retreat from h2 with check. But here Carlsen played king to f2, and now Fressinet just captured the knight, but now the problem is the knight has a retreat square while delivering check, and now this is much better for black. Bishop captures on a7. Carlsen now clears the way for his pass pawns to be queened, but there's a problem. Knight to g4 check. Now the queen has clear path here to the h2 square. If king f3, then queen h5 is very strong. The knight doesn't allow the king to retreat to a dark square, and of course if you go back, then we get the same line as happened in the game. And if you go up the board, then, well, you can even lose the queen. So, well, not immediately as the bishop covers the f2 square, but just queen f5, and your king will be in huge trouble. After this king to g2 move, Fressinet went queen to h2 check with king to f1. Now still the bishop covers the f2 square, so no immediate checkmate is possible. And here Fressinet just repeats moves a couple of times. Queen to f4 check, king to e2 with queen to h2 check with king to f1, queen to f4 check, and here Carlsen goes king to e1. And now Fressinet finally sees that the queen and knight are not able to finish the job on their own. He introduces the rook into the attack. We have rook to c8 now, and for the moment the queen is guarding the c2 square, but only for the moment. We have bishop to g1 by Carlsen. And interestingly, this bishop to g1 will allow a beautiful combination that, will happen very shortly, so do pay attention. We have queen to e5 with check. Carlsen retreats, king to f1, now comes queen back to f4 with check. king to g2, and now comes knight to e5, attacking the queen, hoping to free the c2 square for the black rook. Carlsen goes queen to e2, still keeping an eye on the rook, and now comes the line that became possible when Carlsen put this bishop on b1. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning idea for black here, as Carlsen is about to get checkmated. I'll give you a couple of seconds, just to figure it out. It's a Blitz game, so, feel free to enjoy it while you're calculating. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are definitely not too weak or too slow. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, of course, rook to c2. As Carlsen did try to keep the rook away from the c2 square, simply won't work. And now you see that this is possible due to this bishop being on g1, as the king will not be able to retreat to the g1 square. The only move is either to lose the queen, or you can block, lose the rook, and then lose the queen. So Carlsen just grabbed the rook. There is no better move. And now comes queen to f3 check. And now you can see the king is unable to go to g1. The king has to go to h2. And now, well, it's mate in one. Of course, everyone, you can see it. Knight to g4 checkmate. The queen covers all of these squares, and the king is unable to retreat here. So it's, of course, checkmate. But yeah, just a wonderful game, and an excellent rematch by Laurent Fressinet, who finally, takes back, well, maybe in another few years we'll have another interesting game between the two of them, another one that we can call too weak too slow, and it will again be a very interesting game such as this one. But yeah, that's just the King's Indian. First he gave the b5 pawn, then he pushed c4, a knight d3 check, gave up that pawn as well, and it just all works out. That's why you should play the King's Indian, and that's why, it's always very exciting to play positions that are that are not proportional or just very exciting. So, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Connor Stinson, Anastasia Mathiesen, Ardwolf Games, Rolf Menk, and Max Steiner for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Most likely even today we're continuing the Capablanca saga, as we've said, so I do hope you'll enjoy that as well. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.